diseases, for the most part, are either genetic or so-called idiopathic, meaning that we don't know what the cause of it is. In fact, that you can find the significant, not necessarily only, but significant causation in people's lives, people's life histories going back to early childhood. In fact, you can trace it multi-generationally. And the blindness of my profession to the realities has to do with the fact that we separate entities that cannot be separated in real life. First of all, we separate the mind from the body. So we look at physiology in distinction from the person's emotional life. And secondly, we separate the individual from the environment. Now this separation, by the way, is not new. I'll read you a quote from a very famous teacher who talked about the doctors of his country. He says, this is the reason why the cure of so many diseases is unknown to the physicians of my country. They are ignorant of the whole. For this is the great error of our day in the treatment of the human body, that physicians separate the mind from the body. Who said this? Socrates did 2,400 years ago. So in the West, this mind-body separation is endemic. Contrary to the teachings of the Eastern medical traditions, the Ayurvedic tradition of India has always assumed that mind-body are inseparable, as has the energy medicine of China. And of course, the shamanic traditions of tribal cultures everywhere are grounded in the understanding that mind and body can't be separated. Now the irony, and I might even say the tragedy, of modern medicine is that we no longer have to rely on insight or wisdom or intuition. Not that those are bad things to rely on, but we don't have to rely on them exclusively. We actually have the science that has proven the validity of these ancient teachings. And one of the phrases that I like to completely expunge from the medical lexicon is evidence-based practice, because I only wish. You know, the evidence is clear in so many ways as to what causes illness, and the physiology has been worked out. You know, the neurological pathways have been worked out. I'll talk to you more about that later. But we actually doggedly ignore the evidence. So, what did I notice in my years of practice? Well, I will illustrate the patterns, the emotional patterns of people that are disease-prone by means of newspaper clippings from Canada's leading newspaper, the Globe and Mail, for which I wrote a medical column in the 1960s. Oh, sorry, not 1960s. No, it was not. I'm not that old. 1990s. 1990s. And these are all articles from the Globe, and the first one is a first-person account by a woman who's just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Donna is her name, and her doctor's name is Harold. Her husband's name is Hai. And Hai's first wife died of breast cancer, and now Donna, the second wife, is diagnosed with the same condition. So she writes, Harold, the doctor, tells me that the lump is small, and most assuredly not in my lymph nodes, unlike that of Hai's first wife, whose cancer had spread everywhere by the time they found it. You are not going to die, he assures me. But I'm worried about Hai. I won't have the strength to support him, I say. But what we notice here is that her automatic and compulsive thought is, how will I support my husband through the period when I'm receiving chemotherapy, radiation, possibly surgery? So this automatic and compulsive regard for the emotional needs of others while ignoring one's own is a major risk factor for disease, for reasons I'll explain. The other clippings that I will cite for you are obituaries, and obituaries are fascinating because they tell us not just about the people who died, but also about what we in this culture value about other people. And very often what we value in others is just precisely what kills them. And you've heard the expression, the good die young. They do. For very valid physiological reasons. So this man is a physician. He died at age 55 of cancer in Toronto. The obituary says, never for a day did he contemplate giving up the work he so loved at Toronto's Sick Children's Hospital. He carried out his duties throughout his year-long battle with cancer, stopping only a few days before he died. Now what do we notice here? So if a friend of yours would be diagnosed with a terminal illness or potentially terminal illness, would you say to him or her, hey buddy, here's what you do, you go back to work tomorrow. And all the while that you're going through all the treatment and all the stress of it, ignore yourself completely, just dedicate yourself to work and stop only before you drop. So this compulsive identification with duty, role, and responsibility, again, rather than the needs of the self, is a major risk factor for illness. The next one is written by an appreciative husband about his wife who died at age 55 also of cancer, breast cancer. In her entire life, she never got into a fight with anyone. The worst she could say was fooey or something else along these lines. She had no ego. She just blended in with the environment in an unassuming manner. The suppression of the so-called negative emotions, the repression of them actually, particularly of anger, is a major risk factor for illness because the repression of anger actually suppresses the immune system. I'm talking about healthy anger. Unhealthy anger, rage, actually raises the risk of death. In the aftermath of a rage episode, your risk of a heart attack or stroke double for the next couple of hours. Why? Because increased adrenaline, constricted blood vessels, increased clotting factors, increased blood pressure. But the repression of anger, of healthy anger, is also dangerous, and you'll find that very often in people with autoimmune disease and cancer, for reasons I will explain. And the final obituary then is, again, about a physician who died of cancer, and this one, you just have to take my word for it that I did copy it verbatim from the newspaper. Sidney, was his name, Sidney and his mother had an incredibly special relationship, a bond that was apparent in all aspects of their lives until her death. As a married man with young children, Sidney made a point to have dinner with his parents every day, as his wife Rosalind and their 4 kids awaited for him at home. Never wanted to disappoint either woman in his life, Sidney would walk in, greeted by yet another dinner to eat and to enjoy, until gradual weight gain began to raise suspicions. So this man suffered from 2 fatal beliefs. One is that he is responsible for other people feel, and 2, that he was never disappoint anybody. And they killed him. Now, how these emotional patterns then translate into physiological illness, I will be talking about in a little while. But I'm just going to illustrate my point with an illness that fascinates me. Fascinates me because it's rare, but not that rare. Because the medical profession says that we don't know what causes it. And thirdly, the actual template for it, I believe the cause for it, is staring us right in the face. If we just look at the actual histories of the people who suffer from it. And this is ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, known in North America as Lou Gehrig's disease, after the great baseball player who died of it. Now, a woman came to me for a second opinion about 12 years ago now. She was a vice principal and a teacher at elementary school. She'd been diagnosed by a world expert in Vancouver with ALS, but her husband, particularly knowing my interest in stress, wanted to be told that this is just stress, it's not ALS. Well, it was ALS. She died of it within a year, but it was also stress. Being a teacher, she began to notice that she couldn't hold the pen or the chalk anymore because her fingers wouldn't obey her brain's commands. She also began to have difficulty walking. And then, of course, instead of seeking medical help, what she did for months upon months was to get up early in the morning because everything was slow, including getting dressed. Get herself ready, drive to school, walk into the classroom with her troubled gait, grasp the chalk in her clenched fist, and scrawl the day's lesson on the board for her students. Teach the whole day, stay up late.
Transgender individuals don't want to get surgery, any kind of surgery. It's not an issue for them. So yes, we can know about that and be knowledgeable about it, but we can't make assumptions that just because someone's a transgender individual that they necessarily want to have surgery as well. We're going to do a couple different clips throughout this presentation just to give a little bit more voice to this topic. Has anyone ever heard of transgeneration? Yeah. It is a documentary made by the Sundance Channel. Pretty interesting. We're just going to do a couple different clips just to take a look at what that might look like. And this first one's just from the beginning, so if you see the children, you can gender binary. So there's either male or there's female. It's a dichotomy. There's nothing in between. We'd like to kind of wipe that away a little bit and be open to what is in between, because the fact is that there's a lot in the gray area there. So gender stereotypes. So girls play with dolls, boys play with trucks, girls wear pink, boys wear blue. There's a lot of gender stereotypes that we have. When a baby is born and it's a girl, you might make this, I feel like our society makes assumptions about not only what that means for what this person's going to wear or what they're going to play with, but also who they're going to marry. It's a girl. Someday she will go to her wedding. That's not necessarily the case, and oftentimes is not. Gender roles, so what culture defines as acceptable behaviors, attitudes, emotions, traits, mannerisms for either being male or being female. Gender sex traits is what we are biologically born. Sex is the classification of people as male or female, so a baby has a vagina, this is female. They have chromosomes and hormones that are that align with that. But gender itself is socially constructed, so what is male and what is female is based on what our culture has defined for us. Gender identity, then, is what I feel like I am. So even if I may have been born female, I might feel like a man. That's my gender identity. Those things don't necessarily go together.
Possessed by demons or non-human images or whatever. So this spirit started to bring people with mental illness to Gil because they believed that through the intercession of Saint Infant, they made her a saint. In those days, you didn't have to go through Rome to be a saint. Regional areas could decide saints. Now it's a more formal process, but you have to go through Rome. But they believed that through ritual and spiritual practices and prayer, that there could be cures. And miraculous cures were reported, so more people started to come. Now, modern times, also during those early 14th, 15th century, remember, we saw spirituality and health as combined. Remember? So people who had physical problems would have spiritual problems. The church and society were extremely close. And so people who were feeling ill or mentally ill would be perceived as sick, and they would come to Gil for these rituals. Next slide. So through the centuries, this grew. It started to peak in the 13th century, and you can see the church still stands. But the clergy, they needed a place to put people that were coming. There just wasn't enough room in the church. So they turned to the farmers. And the farmers started to bring the mentally ill into their families. Next slide. So in the 13th century, when the church was built, and in Catholicism, it's a cathedral when there's a bishop in the church. Now there's no bishop there. He's not stationed in St. Edmund Church. However, her remains are there supposedly. And one of the rituals was going under her remains, which I did as a tourist, just to feel. And that was one of the rituals that people would do as part of the curing, was to connect to her, to go under her remains, say prayers, rosary, etc., and feel her intercession. So her remains remain. There is some controversy about that. Oh, also about pilgrimages, the negative side of pilgrimages. So when we were in Gil, of course this is modern times, when the current staff explained the St. Infant myth, I'll explain this a little more later, they're a little more skeptical, saying the church loved to have pilgrimages to certain areas of Europe. Because of why? Money. So they picked Geel for the mentally ill. Now, I asked, why would you want the mentally ill of all places? So who knows? In modern times, we're so skeptical of men, aren't we? And that's another neat thing about teaching at Pacifica. We're not. And it's interesting, and I'll mention it later, when I talked to the staff there about Carl Jung, they said they'd heard of him, but nothing. There wasn't any response about him. So here's the church. And
before we might be strident and rigid, we can now laugh at the fact that I'm thinking that again, and just sort of let it go. Oh, interesting. So take nothing else with you, you can take that. So this very nature of mind itself is called monkey mind, because it jumps around so much. And what happens is what we do all day long, and here's another sad thing, this is how we spend our whole lives. We are either feeling attraction, aversion, or neutrality. We are either saying, I want more, or I want less, or a sort of nihilistic whatever. And my favorite story with this is that there's a great ice cream place in Michigan. Vanilla custard, 14 Mile in Woodward. If you're ever in town, you gotta go there. So every summer, there's sort of this, gotta go get that vanilla custard ice cream cone. So you get in the car, you drive over there, you're salivating the whole way. It's a beautiful night, so you're enjoying the drive, but really, that vanilla ice cream cone's right in the back of your line. I'm salivating right now, by the way. And then you get to the ice cream place, you see the lines around the corner, but that's okay, because you gotta have that vanilla ice cream cone. I want that vanilla ice cream cone. I have a passion for that ice cream cone. I'm attracted to that ice cream cone. I need that ice cream cone. So you wait in line, you get all the way up, you finally get your ice cream cone, you take a bite. Wow, just like I remembered it. So delicious. You take the second bite, the third. I don't know about you, but with me, by the fourth or fifth bite, I'm a little bored. I might as well throw the rest of it away, kind of, because it's okay, but it's kind of getting, I've tasted this already 5 times already in the past minute. So then, I kind of have an aversion to it. I just want to throw the ice cream cone away, like that's enough. So I don't want that. And then whatever, this sort of nihilism. And we do this all day long. Why won't Susie call me? I really want to talk to her. I need her, I gotta talk to her. I hate John. He always treats me terribly. So we do this all day long. I want this, no more of that, whatever. I want more of this, none of this, whatever. This is what we do all day long, constantly. And the only way to avoid this is to learn how to live in the present moment. And I believe the only way you can learn how to do that is to sit and be with yourself in the present moment, time after time after time, until you become experts at it. So what does mindfulness meditation do? And then we're going to do it. It decreases this cortisol, this stress response, the fight or flight response. It decreases it. So as the entire country is dying of heart disease, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, chronic pain, and cancers, we can help that by reducing our cortisol levels. We can be in charge of our own bodies to a great extent. It also decreases anxiety, depression, chronic pain, mood imbalance, attention problems, substance abuse, mindfulness, presence. Research and clinical studies show that regular mindfulness meditation practice can decrease such health concerns. And notice this is from the National Institute of Health, not from Sigler. And what is mind-body connection and mindfulness increase? It increases our immune response. We can make ourselves get better. It increases the body's ability to produce hormones like endorphins, melatonin, DHEA, and other positive hormones that improve our immune response and feelings of pleasure and well-being. It activates the prefrontal cortex with cognitive skills, higher level reasoning and integration, and emotional intelligence, as Daniel Goleman so beautifully has told us in his work. It increases here and now awareness, appreciation, gratitude, meaning, relationship satisfaction, heightened sensory experience, contentment, happiness, and a greater sense of peace and joy. Why not? but we're too busy. We're running around, but we can't take 3 minutes to sit. And I want to show you some practices we can do all day long so that we don't actually have to have a formal sitting practice to be more mindful. So at the present moment, not so much for oxygen intake in this context. Clear everything off of your lap and just sit in your chair with your eyes closed if you're comfortable with that. And I'm going to play a piece of music that's about 5 minutes long. And just like I was saying before, allow this music to fill your body. And just sort of feel it in every part of you. So forget about yesterday and tomorrow. And just let the music fill your body.
Kind of just danced a little less significantly. I had no sense of wanting to revisit them, but it was a nice feeling like, oh yeah, okay, I don't need to be there. Nice experience, thank you.
Oh, very nice. And that's what you can say to these, residual issues. Interesting. And they kind of dissipate because we don't feed them. And there's this notion of like what you said about this wide open space. They say, we try and tame our minds, but you can't tame a wild horse in a little corral. You need to put it in a wide open pasture. And that's what we're doing in this practice is we're opening up this tight corral of mind into this wide open pasture. So with clients, I'll often talk about how large a container can you create for yourself to create a sense of allowing for all that's going on. We can't do it in a tight space, so yeah, I love that idea. Wide space. So maybe we should move on to, very quickly, the other part of the point of our being here today, which is to talk about how do we integrate this into the therapy hour. And what we're going to do is break into groups and talk about it and do that and have a real great brainstorming session. So in lieu of that, can we just have a quick discussion maybe, taking into consideration some of these questions? Okay. So let's see how some of you think you might be able to integrate this sort of Eastern approach. Yeah.
Couple. My talk, my area is trying to bridge the, I think, artificial distinction between education and the clinical work that most of you all do. So my talk today is going to be talking about teachers as wounded healers. So how does Frankel's logotherapy and this concept of a wounded healer inform the practice of a certain subset of teachers in the public schools? So I want to give you a couple, like a test. I think we should start with a quiz. Okay? So here are two participants from a research study, a longitudinal research study that I did. And I'd like to know what you would predict, knowing what you know about risks and resiliencies and how they worked with clients in the past, what would you predict for these two individuals in the future? Here's the first one, Frank. Frank's adolescence was characterized by addiction and defiance. He spent his sophomore year of high school in a locked residential treatment facility and his junior and senior years in therapeutic boarding school. And the therapeutic boarding school was an academic setting, but the students who were placed in there involuntarily had a variety of not only academic problems, but running with the law as well as a history of substance abuse. problems. She enrolled in a private Christian high school as a junior, but was forced to switch to a public high school when she became pregnant during her senior year. She kept the baby. So if you wouldn't mind, share with a partner, someone sitting by you, what you think might be their future. And I'll make it easy for you. I'll give you options. Frank and Marie graduated from high school, but both spent some time incarcerated as adults. Marie receives public assistance to help support her child. That's option A. Option B, Frank and Marie graduated from high school and started working for minimum wage. Frank eventually found union work in manufacturing. Marie lives with her mother. She supports herself by doing in-home child care for other families. And C, at age 22, both Frank and Marie graduated summa cum laude, that is a GPA of 3.9 or greater, in the same nationally recognized teacher preparation program. Both are teachers. So based on your experience, what do you think is the most likely outcome, A, B, or C? You're here, so you're You all right? And I think we can agree that if you weren't this audience, if we were talking to a general audience, probably C would be the least likely response, right? Nevertheless, it is the correct answer. How about Jack? Jack is a 28-year-old combat veteran from an economically disadvantaged background. The way he puts it is he says he grew up in the, quote, hood. He stated he barely graduated from high school. Diagnosed with a learning disability in the first grade, Jack believes his parents gave up on his education and he was thrown away by his teachers. These are his words. He was chronically truant in high school. He used the GI Bill to enroll in college, but he described the experiences as being in some ways more terrifying. He used the word terrifying and he used the word scary than his service in Iraq. And here's a quote that he gave me. He said, war is you go out there and it's kill or be killed. That's something I learned struggling growing up. I know how to survive. You can put me anywhere and I'll make it out. I wasn't prepared for college. It was something I never imagined me doing. War, I knew what I had to do. You go in there, you do your job, and you survive. Watch your back, you'll be good. College, what am I going to do? These kids already know chemistry and algebra 1 and 2 and trig, and I don't know what that is. So, what do you think? For Jack's future, did he drop out of college after one unsuccessful year? B, he completed an associate's degree and is contemplating going back to school for his bachelor's. Or C, he graduated from a nationally recognized teacher preparation program with a 3.3 GPA and is currently teaching elementary physical education. So what do you think? Of course. Yes. Another surprising, but in this context, very predictable answer. Are you familiar with wounded healers? I'm assuming most of you are. It comes back from Greek mythology, the myth of Chiron, who was an immortal creature who received a mortal wound. So he had to live his whole life wounded, could not heal himself, and so he directed his energies towards helping others. Plato talked about the wounded physician heals. May, Frankl, certainly. Frankl, I put this double consciousness spin on Frankl's work. Frankl was the psychiatrist, the Jewish psychiatrist who spent 3 years in 4 different concentration camps during World War II. He was very unique in his perspective in that he understood suffering from an academic perspective, having been a very well-trained neurologist and psychiatrist before the war. But then when he was placed in the camps, he had the experience, a visceral experience of suffering. And so I put W.E.B. Du Bois' double consciousness on that to show that you can step inside and out of those two roles in being a wounded healer. Obviously, probably the most well-known example of what wounded healers are used today is in programs like AA, where you take responsibility for helping others who are not quite as far along in the process as you are. about my method. But basically, it's a 2-year process of interviewing these folks. At the end, after I wrote up my reports, I go back to them with the reports and have them respond to it. And the very last words in all of these articles that I publish are their words. So that provides some number checking and I hope some validity support for these findings. Okay, so let me actually distribute a couple of handouts that I think would be helpful. And this is the set
Hello. How's it going?
Pretty good, how are you?
I'm big, running around. Oh wait, I got time to say hello. Good to see you here, man.
See you.
I was, you know what, mine? Same thing. I was like, because I really want to see that stuff. Because I'm getting into that kind of in my life. You know, I'm starting to think that's a route for me right now. Is in there.
Yeah.
My, I volunteer.